Breaking tonight with the nightmare of a nuclear-armed Iran growing larger, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is getting ready to share a high-stakes warning with the U.S. Congress, one the Obama administration would prefer the American people not hear. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. The stakes could not be higher. Republican Senator John McCain says leaders across the Mideast are warning if the U.S. strikes a weak nuke deal with Iran, we can expect a nuclear weapons arms race across the Middle East. This administration maintains our best chance for peace is getting Iran to agree to limit its own program. Roughly 12 hours from now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is expected to stand before a packed U.S. Congress that will be missing more than 50 Democrats who are boycotting the speech, which was initiated not with White House approval, but by House Speaker John Boehner. Tonight, U.S. officials confirmed not a single member of the Obama administration will be in attendance, not even the U.S. ambassador to Israel, because many Democrats consider this a political stunt.
First, let me clarify what is not the purpose of that speech. My speech is not intended to show any disrespect to President Obama or the esteemed office that he holds. I have great respect for both. My speech is also not intended to inject Israel into the American partisan debate. The purpose of my address to Congress tomorrow is to speak up about a potential deal with Iran that could threaten the survival of Israel. Iran envelops the entire world with its tentacles of terror. This is what Iran is doing now without nuclear weapons. Imagine what Iran would do with nuclear weapons. And this same Iran vows to annihilate Israel. If it develops nuclear weapons, it would have the means to achieve that goal. We must not let that happen. American leaders worry about the security of their country. Israeli leaders worry about the survival of their country. You know,
Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry is live tonight at the White House. Ed?
Good evening, Megyn. The bottom line is what Republican Senator John McCain told Fox today is that he has had multiple conversations with various Arab leaders who say that there could be a nuclear arms race in the Mideast in the days ahead, that if this Iranian nuclear deal goes through, they will try to get their own bombs. They will go nuclear themselves. Saudi Arabia, other countries in the Gulf. And that may explain why tonight, from the president on down, various officials are walking back some of their recent attacks on Benjamin Netanyahu, but also some comments that angered the Jewish community. Susan Rice telling AIPAC in her own speech tonight that the attack that killed 4 Jews in Paris was, quote, anti-Semitic, cleaning up a bit the president's recent comments that called that a random act of violence. While the president himself did an interview with Reuters in which he tried to clean up Susan Rice's comments where she claimed the prime minister's trip would be destructive to this relationship. Listen.
I don't think it's permanently destructive. I think that it is a distraction from what should be our focus. And our focus should be, how do we stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon?
Now, today I pressed Josh Earnest about another big development today. The UN's nuclear watchdog saying that they have not gotten cooperation recently from Iran. Josh Earnest pushed back by saying this agency, the IAEA, has said that they did get cooperation in terms of freezing nuclear activities on one track, but on a second track, they are not getting cooperation on alleged explosives tests by Iran. That's raising new questions tonight about whether they're cheating. Megyn?
That seems important. Ed, thank you. As Ed just mentioned, just last week, the president's national security advisor, Susan Rice, was hammering the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, for accepting the invitation to speak to Congress. Here is Mrs. Rice.
What has happened over the last several weeks, by virtue of the invitation that was issued by the Speaker and the acceptance of it by Prime Minister Netanyahu on 2 weeks in advance of his election, is that on both sides there has now been injected a degree of partisanship, which is not only unfortunate, I think it's destructive of the fabric of the relationship.
Here now in a Kelly File exclusive, Governor Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor and a former presidential candidate. He returned from Israel last week where he had a chance to meet with Mr. Netanyahu. Good to see you tonight, Governor. And so there have been real questions about why Benjamin Netanyahu is doing this. Why, if it's not about politics, did he not say to John Boehner, I'll do it, but I'll do it after the Israeli election. Then I'll come. Then I'll address the American people. If he had done that, no one would be accusing him of playing politics with this. But he took the invitation without alerting the White House, and now some are crying foul.
Well, I think that if he had waited until the Israeli elections, the deal might have been already done. And part of the issue is the deadline with which this negotiation goes forth gets dangerously close. This is not a good idea for Netanyahu for his own political benefit. And anybody who thinks he's doing this in advance of the Israeli elections because it's good for him, well, they haven't been reading the Israeli press. Megan, I was just there. I'm telling you, this is very destructive to him politically. He's doing it because he realizes that a nuclear Iran is really a death sentence to Israel. And it is a proliferation of nuclear arms across the Middle East. And he's risking his political life because he values not just the future of Israel, but really the future of civilization. The Iranians are just crazy enough to use a nuclear weapon if they had one.
Secretary of State John Kerry says, look, give the president the benefit of the doubt in these negotiations. He is not going to, and has no incentive to, strike a deal with Iran that would not actually curb its nuclear abilities or be acceptable to the American people.
Well, this is a president who told us we could keep our doctors, we could keep our health insurance. They're going to get to the bottom of Benghazi, and that was all about a video. We were told they're going to get to the bottom of the IRS scandal. We're going to get to the bottom of the Fast and Furious. I'm sorry, but the president has no credibility when it comes to saying, look, you can trust me. Actually, we can't. And the truth is, we certainly can't trust the Iranians. And whatever legacy the president wants to have by saying, look, I made a deal with the Iranians, it can't be a good deal because you can't trust a government that has vowed openly and publicly that it's going to wipe another nation off the face of the earth.
No, it's just like, you know, within the last year, they had their 9-point plan for doing exactly that.
Well, and Megan, this is like saying, okay, they had 19,000 centrifuges. We're going to only let them have 6,000. This is the equivalent of saying we're not going to let a pyromaniac have a blowtorch, but we'll let him have, you know, a cigarette lighter and a can of gasoline. You just don't put those kind of opportunities in the hands of crazy people who would use those destructive forces. What
do you make of the fact, because we're going to have a Democratic representative, a Jewish Democratic representative, who is going to boycott the speech tomorrow, coming on right after you. What do you make of the some 50-plus Democrats who will not be there, who will walk out of a packed U.S. Congress tomorrow when Mr. Netanyahu shows up, and not even one member of the administration, including our ambassador to Israel, will attend?
It's disappointing and disheartening, and I would say this. Listen to the speech. If you don't agree with it, then in a free country you can certainly say that you disagree with it and you can explain why. But to not listen, to say we want diversity of views as long as they agree with ours. Shouldn't we want more information, not less information? Shouldn't we want more voices speaking to this, not fewer voices? I don't understand this boycott mentality. Look, if you want to go and fold your arms and say, I'm not going to stand up and I'm not even going to applaud, knock yourself out. Go for it. But I think the Prime Minister's speech is an important speech, certainly for members of Congress, because they need to monitor this deal. But, Megan, this is important for all the American people and for all the people of the free world who value their liberty and who believe that there is a threat to it from the Iranians.
It's a pivotal moment, the month of March. Governor, good to see you.
Thank you, Megan.
Well, one of the House Democrats who says he will not attend the Israeli Prime Minister's speech tomorrow is Tennessee Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen, who is himself Jewish. Good to see you tonight, sir. Thank you for being here with us. And so tell us why, given what Governor Huckabee just said, he thinks are the reasons why you should attend. Tell us why you won't.
Well, Megan, you know, just like people watch you on television, and I can understand why, I'm going to watch the speech on television. I'm not going to not watch the speech. I'm not going to not listen to what the Prime Minister says. I'm just not going to be part of a spectacle where oftentimes you're judged based on how many times you stand up or don't. I went to the speech.
Well, I mean, that applies to the State of the Union, too. You go to that.
Well, that's different because that's about the American president speaking to the American Congress, which is a traditional annual event that goes on forever. To have a foreign prime minister come into Congress and speak 2 weeks before his election and to speak against the foreign policy objectives of the President of the United States and the State Department, and we should be together in foreign policy, is different. But I'm going to watch it on TV. I'm going to read all the pundits pro and con. I've gone to every briefing. I love Israel. I'm for Israel. I think Israel is going to be hurt by this speech, and I think it has been hurt, because the bottom line is President Obama is the most important person in America for Israel to have a good relationship with. It's important that the Commander-in-Chief and the Prime Minister of Israel work together. And the fact is, this debate shouldn't be in Washington. The debate really is in Geneva.
Well, but why shouldn't
Prime Minister
you guys don't have a
wait a
say
second,
too.
Megan.
No,
I think Prime Minister Netanyahu should have worked on going and talking to the P5,
I think I gave you a nice long time for the first answer. Now I'd like to ask you.
You gave me a heck of a build-up too.
And now I'd like to ask you a follow-up question, which is that's fine. So obviously they have negotiating to do, which hasn't gone very well from the look of where we are with Netanyahu.
We don't know where the negotiating is.
But Congress has a role too, and you guys may have to step in and pass stiffer sanctions, or God forbid something military if things go really south when it comes to Iran. Why shouldn't he speak to you directly on something you heard him in those sound bites earlier he really believes is an existential threat to Israel?
He believed in 2002 when he spoke to the Foreign Relations Committee that Iraq had nuclear weapons, was about to have them, and that they had an ability to transport them on some kind of a movable railroad, none of which was true, and that was all false. So unfortunately, and that has been reproduced and distributed quite widely, and even Mossad contradicted something that Prime Minister Netanyahu said. I wish it wouldn't have happened, but Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't come to the table with the best marks either.
You know who doesn't either? Iran.
Well, Iran's bad, believe me. They're bad actors. But for the first time, we've got inspectors at their facilities, inspectors at their mines,
the inspectors say they're
everywhere
not
they can go. Well, I think that if they're not, we can pull out, and whatever happens, happens.
They're not. That's what the inspectors say.
If we don't have an agreement, the alternative is, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, is additional sanctions. It's my understanding from people I respect who know the Middle East philosophy, this will not break their back, but will get them to stiffen their back. And when they stiffen their back, they're more likely to proceed to getting a nuclear weapon and put us on the edge of nuclear war. I think negotiations always are more important. Diplomacy is important. And I think to have inspectors.
It's helpful if you have somebody you can trust on the other side. And what these inspectors are saying is you cannot trust Iran, that they are continuing to do what they said they wouldn't,
let's assume
and
what
that they will not allow full inspection so we can ascertain their compliance. That remains a problem. I'll give you the quick final word, sir.
Right. Assuming you're right and you can't trust them, then you don't negotiate with them. You don't have diplomacy. What's the alternative? The alternative is war. And I don't think anybody wants to put war on the table, and that would be a serious mistake. We need to work
sanctions
against
are a step we could take too. The tightened
sanctions won't work.
All right, I got to go.
Won't work.
Sir, I thank you for being here with your perspective.
You're welcome. You're welcome.